Hello and welcome to tonight's Get in Tune. I'm Michael Gracia as usual, and tonight I got a really great guest. I know I say that kind of often, but I think all my guests are great. Number one. Number two, I've been a fan of this guy's work for such a long time. Um, I've met him once in a while at shows, just in passing, and I never really got to sit down and talk with him. And he's done a lot of great stuff. All right, so let's bring on Ray Lago. Hi, Ray.
Hey guys. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Well, thank you for coming on. Like I said in my intro, I've been a big fan of yours since it has to be since the late 90s when I first started seeing your work and started going to shows, and I was able to see you and pick up prints and things, which I tried to find my prints of your stuff because I have a couple of binders with artwork that I get from shows, and I just can't find it right now. So it was a little upsetting to me. But I remember before we get into this that I signed up a while back, and I don't know if you still do this, and I've moved since then, for a mailing list, and you would send around the holidays these beautiful cards of like angels and stuff. And
yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but I remember your name from that list. Yes. That
really?
list at one point had 1,000 people, which sounds
Wow.
crazy. And I actually printed them up. I did it as a yearly thing. And then it petered out around, I got to say around 2000. I think that was the last card that I sent out. And I think in 2000, I think it was 2000, could have been 2001. The last card I sent out was not sent out for the holidays. It was sent out for the 6-month anniversary of 9/11. So that gives you the idea of when that was. That was going to originally be a holiday card. Then I thought, I don't want to send it at Christmas time. I'm going to send. You probably got that because you were probably on the list.
Was that I remember an angel, I think, holding a candle, or an angel.
That was it. That was it. And the World Trade Center rubble in the background. That's it. That was the last thing that I sent out.
That was the last. I have like 2 or 3 cards I believe you sent out, and I know I have a Spiderman print from you somewhere. But they are great. I pull them out every now and then and check them out. I just don't know which binder it's in to go to.
Well, as I was talking to you before, I do have a few slideshows that I created for this thing I did for this fraternity, that for those who aren't very familiar with my work, I can share the slideshows and show them a variety of trading cards and covers and things and even magic cards that I've done over the years.
Okay. I'd be happy to look at them in a little bit, especially your Magic. I'm a big fantasy fan, and I never played Magic, but I collected some of the cards just because I like the artwork.
Oh, the art's amazing.
I don't know if I have any of your cards, but I'd have to go through and look. I'll know if I see photos. I'm very good.
I have a slideshow where I think every card is in there. I'm not sure because I'm not sure when I put it together if I had all the scans or not. I did like 20 something of them, and it was just I don't know. It sounds weird. I guess I'm a dabbler in a lot of stuff. Didn't start out dabbling, but I kind of, I dabble in the sense that I did some comic stories. I did some comic covers. I did trading cards, did gaming cards, spot illustrations, whatever. But I've kind of gone wherever the work took me, what was available at the time, rather than like I had one specific thing, like I'm only going to do this. That's by myself.
That's a smart way of working, though.
It's not really smart. I don't know that it was smart. It's just the path that it took, and I wasn't trying to control it too much because it's just whatever was available. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me do that. You know? And I always kind of felt fortunate actually to get the kind of work. So
So let's before we really get into your work and stuff, let's go back into your past. I mean, your work is fantasy based these days with comics in there. Was that always something you enjoyed since childhood, or
since I was 8? Well, when I was a little kid, I guess, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, I remember that I liked to draw. But so did my older brother. I kind of assumed everyone liked to draw. Then, and kindergarten, first grade, whatever, I would draw and teacher would notice, that kind of thing. I never thought there was anything special about it really until probably about fourth grade, where one teacher kind of made a fuss about it, and then I was doing artwork for like bulletin boards and things like that.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I was like school artist. It was a weird thing because I knew nothing about anything except I copied stuff from comic books and comic strips, and that's it. You know, I knew nothing. And the grammar school art classes in there, they kind of taught us a few things, but it was more like paper mache. I made a Snoopy head, or tried to. It was pretty rough. I mean, you know, all the paper clogged up on top of a balloon, trying to get that peanut shape. I really, by the way, I think that's why they call it peanuts. I think it's the shape of Snoopy's head. But or Schultz altered Snoopy because he didn't look like that in the beginning, but slowly he became sort of a peanut-headed dog. Anyway, so, and I was a big fan, by the way, of Peanuts, the comic strip. I loved it, you know.
Oh, me too.
But I used to copy the Peanut strips. I would copy, you know, comic book drawings like, you know, Marvel Comics, DC Comics, try and draw the covers, try and draw panels on the inside, try to make up my own. When I was a kid, grammar school.
Yeah.
And I wasn't planning on doing it for a living. I was fortunate to get into a private high school, a college prep school in Jersey City called St. Peter's Prep. And it really is one of the best high schools in the state. And I got there on a scholarship because I was a brainy kid. Yeah, not the brainiest kid at that school though, but I was brainy in my world. When I was in the private school, I was a little above average, but nowhere near the guys at the top at all. I was definitely eclipsed. I wasn't sure that I wanted to become an artist, but when I went to college, I thought, you know, while I'm here, let me take some art classes. If I really like it, then I'm going to go there. I was thinking about three different things. I was thinking about art. I was thinking about writing, like, you know, journalism columns, things like that, or even about law, you know, like criminal law, not business law or anything like that. And so my first semester, I took 2 art classes, and I was like sold. I'm like, I enjoyed it so much that I didn't care whether or not I can make money out. If I had to do something else to pay for my bill, I would still pursue art, because just like when I was a kid, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It was just great. So I still remember that at the end of that first semester in I guess Christmas 1976 or something, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this one way or the other. And again, I'm not even worried about whether I'll make a living. I just know that I want to do this. So, and again, you can feel that way when you're 18 going on 19. You don't have to really think too far ahead. So while I was in college, I did manage to get some freelance work while I was still a college student. It wasn't great work, and it wasn't comics work. I think it was my junior year in college. I avoided taking classes that I don't know why I avoided this, but there was an English composition class that was you had to take it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I thought it was going to be really horrible or boring, whatever, but I kept putting it off. But I had to, take it if I was going to get a degree. And originally I wasn't concerned about getting a degree. But then at a certain point, you're there long enough, but I leave here, I should have a degree. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. And I was right about that. Not for freelancing, but for teaching.
Yeah.
As you know. So anyway, an English composition class, first of all, it was a piece of cake, which I didn't think it was going to be. And second of all, I wrote a short story that happened on campus. And this was a reflection of the comic strips that I had already done for the college paper, where I was already starting to be creative and have fun and do things. I took this little murder mystery that takes place on campus, on our college campus. And at the time in Detective Comics, Robin the Teen Wonder was now in college, and he was solving murders and stuff on campus, crime-ridden, Gotham College or something. And so I converted it to a Robin story, and I sent it to DC Comics. I sent them a fan letter when I was like a child, and I actually got something back in the mail from them, like a nice little letter thanking me for whatever, which was amazing. I don't know why I still don't have that. I should still have that. Dang it. I don't know what the heck ever happened to that. And I also don't know what happened to the letter or whatever I got from Bob Rozakis. They liked the story. They weren't saying they were going to buy it, but they wanted me to come in. So at the age of, I guess, 20 or something, I went into New York and met with Bob Rozakis at DC offices and met him. and they just thought that the writing was good, even if they weren't interested in the story. So he told me more of the kind of stories that they were looking for. And also, and I told them that I was an art student, but that sometimes I get ideas, and I wrote this one for English Comp, and I altered it. And I don't know, he ushered me in to meet Julie Schwartz, if you can believe that.
Wow.
And Julie Schwartz gave me a sample script so I would know the format better. And I don't know how to write a script. And so give me a form. It was written by Carrie Bates, and it was for a Superman comic book that came out like either Superman or maybe it was Action Comics that came out like 4, 5, 6 months after he gave me it. I have a copy of that comic book somewhere, but I don't know where's that script. I don't know where that script is. And I remember that on one page, Carrie Bates, I think himself, drew this feature character that was inside the story. I should have that. God knows that. I think it was stolen. I think someone stole it from me. Anyway, because that's something I would never have lost. Anyway, so basically that was my first touch into comics, and it was more as they were considering me. And I knew it was a huge compliment, for that. I mean, my God. But it also wasn't the kind of busy days that were to come with comics. There were more openings back then. There was more of an open door policy. I look back and I just think that's amazing that I actually went in there and met with these people. And I'm just some snot-nosed kid in a dorm, There was a guy named Dave McCoy who I met in my painting class in my sophomore year. And my painting class, the teacher was very nice, but the 2 painting classes I had didn't teach me much. I really learned almost nothing. Part of it's my own fault for not really taking any kind of color theory class. But the other thing is just I needed more academic training than I got. A lot of these classes were being taught by fine artists rather than illustrators. So anyway, Dave McCoy was in one of my classes, and he was taking a comic book class in Manhattan. It was the John Buscema, John Romita workshop, which was like a famous thing back in the late 70s. Yeah, I've heard of it. Anyway, so he invited me to come along as a guest. I didn't have to pay anything, just to sit once. And John Romita Sr. was there. And he actually showed, it was a small room, and he actually showed how he did, at the time he was doing the Sunday comic, Spiderman comic strip for the funnies. And he actually showed his whole process, which was really cool. How, he did the drawing small, he blew them up, he lightboxed them or he projected them, and he did the pencils, and he went through the whole thing. Then he shared with us pencils by Sal Buscema for a Marvel team-up, Spider-Man Marvel team-up issue. Had the Scarlet Witch and Spider-Man. And I was never a big fan of Sal Buscema. I really loved John Buscema. He was a god. Along there with Neil Adams and other people, John Buscema was a god. Sal Buscema, not as much, because John eclipsed him, But when I saw those pencils, I got what Sal Buscema was doing. Because studying illustration, I was thinking like an illustrator. When you see Sal Buscema's pencils, now God knows what they look like before they come to the final page, but it is really clean, perfect, like cartooning. And that's when I realized, oh, no, he's being a cartoonist. He's not being an illustrator. He's being a comic book cartoonist. That's what he is. So he can tell the stories. He's not interested in being Alfredo Alcala or Rudy Nebres or anything like that, being very illustrative. If that happens over his work, that's another story. He's doing really clean, solid cartooning. I never forgot seeing that. I was like, I just newfound respect when I saw his pencils. I realized, okay, I've been looking at him all wrong. I'm criticizing him for what he is not, which is absurd, which is something an 18-year-old or 19-year-old might do, So, all these little interactions I had with that world as a kid in college were really educational, even though there were just a few here and there. They were important. It was quite a few years later, after I was out of college. I'd been doing freelance illustration for a few clients, and I knew people who were in comics. I shared a studio down in Soho with a guy, Dennis Francis, who was doing work for Blackthorn Publishing, that big black and white boom in the early 80s, I think it was. And I met a writer who was a friend of his, who years later was pitching something to Denny O'Neil at DC Comics. He had written, Mark Wayne Harris is his name, and he had written a few titles for Shanes and Shanes Publishing, Blackthorn Publishing. And I had done some samples of things that I had sent to David Campiti's company. I forgot what they were called, Wonder something. something Wonder Comics, and I was going to do something for them down the road. But then Mark was meeting with them at a trade show in Morristown, New Jersey. And he said, hey, you want to go over there and actually meet these guys in person? And he says, then bring the samples, because I did this thing that he pitched to Denny O'Neil, Batman pages that weren't very good, but at the time I was pleased with them. And I brought them along with me, along with some other things. And while I was at the trade show, what's it? Oh, God, I'll kill myself if I remember. Carol. What was her Carol's name? How can I not remember Carol? Carol's famous Carol. Carol, I can't remember her name. She spearheaded some amazing stuff over at Marvel Comics. I'm embarrassed now, not remember her name. But she walked through the aisles, said hello to people there, including Paul Curtis, who worked for David Campiti. And Paul called her back to look at my work. And she looked at me, she asked me, do you like science fiction? And of course, the correct answer to that from any editor anywhere is yes.
Yes.
And so I said yes. And she said, give me a call. And, I'd like you to come in to Marvel offices. And I'm like, okay. So the next week I went into Marvel offices and I started doing open space for Kurt Busiek.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it went from, I started doing a story. And then I did another story and a final story before the title closed because Carol passed away. It was very sad. She died young, unexpected, of an aneurysm. I had also painted a cover, and Mark McLaurin from Hellraiser, from Epic Offices, was doing Hellraiser, Clive Barker's title, and asked me to do something for him. Fabian Nicieza wanted having me do some work for Hook, the Marvel movie adaptation. And then, let's see, the overlapping in there somewhere was Ivanhoe for Classics Illustrated. That was happening simultaneously. And then Tom Brevoort, who's still at Marvel, one of the few who's still at Marvel, and Glenn Greenberg, his assistant, hired me to do trading cards for the Marvel Masterpieces second set, the one that followed Cusco's big set.
And that was in the 90s, right? Like the trading.
Yeah. So basically, you could see how one thing led to another thing, which led to another thing, which led to another thing. Once, like, you were in and people saw your work, all of a sudden your name got pitched around. People start calling you out of the blue, and that is a really weird thing, by the way. When the phone rings and your wife picks it up and says, "Someone named Elaine Lee wants to talk to you," and I'm thinking, Elaine Lee, starstruck, Michael Kaluta. And also Ragman, a title that I was buying regularly. It was drawn originally by Kubert and then Redondo. And I was like, holy crap. So all of a sudden that kind of thing started happening regularly. The fanboy in me was, in heaven, I skipped one thing briefly. When I was getting out of college, the freelance work that I had lined up just started disappearing. And I had some advertising art skills, kind of self-taught using markers and stuff. And some of my studio mates said, you should, show your stuff to Continuity Associates, Neil Adams's art studio.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't imagine I'm going to pass muster there, but, I was pretty brave. So I called them up and met with them. I met with Neil, which is the weirdest thing to come into a place. And he came over, looked at my work and said, Neil Adams. And I said, in a much less strong voice, Ray Lago, shook his hand. And I worked there for about 5 months. Wow. I didn't make much money, but I learned a lot of stuff. Yeah. And it was such a, again, I was at a drawing table next to Neil for again, about 5 months, which is, and I know I was like 19 years old. No, I was like 20 years old. Sorry, 20 or 21 years old. And that is just amazing. And I met some, some artists there who were in and out of the place. For example, Joe Rubenstein, I met him there. He doesn't remember, but I met him there first. Dennis Cowan had a little space there. Guys like Larry Hama were there, but I never interacted. Marshall Rogers was there. And he was really nice. We hung out a little bit, unexpectedly. I mean, because I'm not their age. I'm younger at the time. And one evening, working there late on something, Marshall pops in and goes, "Hey, Ray, you want to go get something to eat?" I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to go hang out at a diner with Marshall Rogers. Yeah, I think so. you know. So I've had all these little moments of fanboy heaven, which are just, you know, amazing. But the comics thing came kind of like, again, by doing some samples for a writer friend that when they were seen, not even by the people that they were pitched for, because they were shown to DC Comics, then they were shown to David Campiti's company, which was going to give me a project. And then it got shown to Marvel, and they were the first ones to give me work from it. All that happened like within a year of my doing the samples or so, around a year and a half. So it was like, it wasn't like I just showed something and boom, I got work. It, you know, took a while. And meanwhile, I was doing freelance illustration for all kinds of different clients, running around my portfolio, just trying one more thing to make the rent and pay the bills and all the rest of it. So that scramble part I did not miss. Once I was getting regular work through comics, that wasn't the best paying work. It was not the best paying work, but it was the steadiest work. It was like one project after another, after another, after another, after another. Which lasted pretty steady for like a decade, a little more. And yeah, as a freelancer, that's amazing.
I know.
And not the highest pay, but regular. But not regular the way my wife would have called regular. That would be like a salary. But regular freelance work, I knew how hard that was to come by as a freelancer. And to have that. And I have to admit that as I got to know more people who worked in comics, I was kind of surprised that a lot of them had not worked as any kind of an illustrator out in what I want to call the real world, because their criticisms of the comics field would be quite different if they, you know, because the regularity of work like that is not common in the illustration field, not at all. So, you know, unless you're lucky to do some cover job for like a major magazine, and those days were gone. Those days petered out in the 1940s, I think. So 50s, the latest. So no, it was no. So all that was, so that's where I started doing, and everything just, you know, went on from there, you know, all the way up to doing Annie Fanny for Playboy and Magic the Gathering stuff. You know, it just one thing led to another.
I just want, there's a comment that's saying hi to me. I just want to say hi back to them. It's from NV Sparks, who they're calling me. It says, hey, Mr. Gracia. So I'm assuming it's a student of mine. So thank you for watching. But, you know, if you have any questions, feel free to ask Ray questions about his work. And we're going to take a look at some in a little bit, I think. But yeah, getting back to what you're saying, number one, have steady work like that is insane as a freelancer. I ran my own freelance from 94 to really 9/11, and that's kind of when things slowed down. And
yeah, no, things slowed down for me after 9/11 also. It did.
Yeah.
Not that there weren't some hiccups before then, but really it was after 9/11 when the work did start to peter out.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had some ups and downs and stuff, and now I freelance kind of when, you know, something comes along. I don't do the hustle anymore. I got a regular gig, and I focus on, you know, my own stuff now. But you were saying how, you know, you were doing covers, you did some you did the trading cards, you did Magic the Gathering. Since it seems from the work I know of you, you spent a lot of time in the superhero world. With comics. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Magic. I mean, obviously it's fantasy. Did you have a love for fantasy?
Well, growing up, you know, everything, Greek and Roman mythology, Norse mythology. I loved all that stuff. I would read it. I'd look at pictures. I love that stuff. I love the movies. Anytime there was a Channel 7 4:30 movie where it was all like Gladiators or Hercules movies or stuff like that for the week, you know, Jason the Argonauts. I loved all that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with, I mean, I knew Tolkien was, and I read The Hobbit in high school, but I didn't read The Lord of the Rings because, quite frankly, the book was too thick. I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's a commitment. That's like a marriage. I read lots of paperback books, but that was like the thickest paperback book for a single story I'd ever saw. So I was like, no, I think I'll pass. I enjoyed The Hobbit, except there's a little too much sing-song kind of stuff going on in it, and a lot of stuff where they would go past a certain ruin and maybe 5 pages describing what happened at that location, though it had no pertinence to the actual storyline of The Hobbit. So, but I know he's creating a world, but, you know, I didn't really care about that. I just wanted to read a good yarn as a kid. So even when Magic the Gathering happened, I didn't know that it related to a lot of that kind of Tolkien kind of world. Things like orcs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And that happened again. Even though I liked that stuff, I didn't play games. When I was my final year of college, a bunch of us had decided to rent a. We were very adventurous, being at our age. I don't know who came up with the idea, but we decided to rent a commercial space while we're still in college, just so we have room to work.
Yeah.
And so each of us chipped in whatever it was, less than $100 each, and we rented a place in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I went to college at Kane University in Union, New Jersey. So in Elizabeth, where some of my friends were from, we rented this commercial space and converted into a studio. There were like 6 of us with different, spots in this kind of meandering office thing. And, I remember specifically getting calls from a couple of friends of mine who were playing Dungeons and Dragons in their mom's basement or something, right? I mean, literally in mom's basement, in one of their mom's basement. And more than once I was invited to go. They would say, this has all the stuff you love. There's dragons, there's, swordsmen, there's knights, all this kind of stuff. And I'd said, and I'd hear them, I'd listen to the pitch and I'd say, oh, I agree with you. I'll bet I would really enjoy it. But how, some of them were art majors. I'm like, how do you have the time to do this? I'm working on homework. I'm working on pieces for my portfolio. Now and then I'm lucky enough to actually get a little freelance job. I don't have time to go play any game, not Monopoly, not Clue, and Clue is one of my favorite games, or I don't have time to play, Parcheesi, nothing. I don't have time for this, not even chess. I'm too busy with what I'm doing. I said, thanks. So that was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons, with basically saying thanks, but no thanks. And I didn't really, of course, I started seeing the advertisements in comics and elsewhere for Dungeons and Dragons, White Wolf, Magic the Gathering. And I knew that it had gotten big. But I never pursued following them, because at one point I thought, once I got a little bit better as a painter, and I was being published, I had met an art director at a publishing house that published paperback covers that had a lot of fantasy. And I called him up and I said, because I knew him, and I told him I'd be interested in doing stuff. And he said that I would be a hard sell because all the stuff I did was more superhero stuff, and they would need to see something that looked more like a fantasy paperback. And that if I did some stuff like that, they would definitely consider me. He could show my stuff around. But I was already too busy. I couldn't sit around doing samples for anybody. I mean, that's turning down work. It would take, we're not talking just not, it would have to be more involved even than a magic card. It'd be very finished. Anyway, so that didn't happen. But that was my one, dipping my toe into possibly doing that stuff. And then one year at San Diego Comic-Con, I was there with my pals, which Dave Dorman, Chris Muller, Scott Hampton. And I don't know if George Pratt and John Van Fleet were with us that year. There were 4 of us that hung out a lot. And then Tommy Lee Edwards and George, I said George, that I mentioned before, and John. Again, great guys, super talented guys. All of a sudden, we were all in the same spot at San Diego, which was an amazing treat. Anyway, well, one time, I guess an art director for Magic came over to say hello to Chris and Dave, who were doing work for him. Even Scott, I think, had done some work for Magic, and George at one point. Anyway, he came over and he introduced himself to me, and he said, will you be interested in working for Magic? And I said, yeah, sure. I gave him my business card. And about a month or two later, he called me up and gave me an assignment. I have students who sometimes ask me, how did you break into Magic? And I'm like, probably not the way that you would break into Magic. They come up and ask me, which is really, don't get me wrong, that, I say I don't take that for granted. At the time, I guess I did take it for granted. Because you're so busy. Like, it didn't matter whether they called me or not, because I had more work than I could handle. I was trying to work down. But when they called me, it was kind of fun, but I wasn't familiar with everything. Fortunately, they sent us these Bibles that had a lot of stuff in it, which helped. But I was very often not sure if I was doing, what they wanted or not. But on and off for, several years, I did 20 something cards for them. And the problem is the art directors would change. And if you're not pitching stuff to them and keeping in touch with them, and I don't do the shows, I've never done Gen Con, I've never done Dragon Con. If I traveled to those and then, showed my magic work to White Wolf and whatever, and been entrenched in that world, I'd get more of that work. But again, when you're busy getting work, if you got more work you can handle, you don't do that. You just, and to go to Dragon Con or Gen Con would have meant not only would I have to have a lot of originals to sell, and I had some, but also you have to make prints. And now people can make prints in their home, but at that time it meant plopping down a lot of money to print like 1,000 or 1,500 signed limited edition run, which you can do. That's one of the wonderful things about Magic the Gathering. They give you the license to do that.
Wow.
They give you the license to spend a lot of money, so that over the years you can make your money back and eventually make a profit. With home printers and on-demand printing, it's different now. But at the time, it just wasn't, as much as I love the idea that, wow, you could do this. This is all pre-internet. So therefore it wasn't, it wasn't happening. And then on the early days of the internet where I wasn't really on the internet. But my experiences with Magic were pretty good. But nothing's come from them in a long time. And on a rare occasion, I'll get the urge and I'll send an email because the phone numbers aren't the same. The people I knew aren't even there anymore. But I never get a call back. I never get a response to anything. And I mean, I'll show the work I did for them, but it doesn't generate any work. Would I be interested in doing some work for them? Yeah, I would be interested in doing some stuff for them. If they decide to hire some oldsters, I jump on board. I do take some consolation in that people that I know, Chris Muller actually decided to retire from doing Magic the Gathering. But the other people that are friends of mine who did many more Magic Gathering cards than I did, they don't get a call either from the newer art directors. So I don't feel singled out, which is some consolation. You got to take your consolations where you can get them.
Well,
I've never played the games. I've never played the games. But the imagery, the artistry of so many of their artists, I mean, and I marveled, and I remember discussing this with Chris Muller one time, I marveled at how much work some of these people, because they pay okay, but they don't pay a lot of money, really, in generally speaking. And I would see these amazing works of art. And I don't mean like just genius. I mean detail, lots of labor, amazing things that are really should be book covers, posters, wraparound covers. And they're being done by something that printed the size of a, priority mail stamp, basically. And I look and think, holy crap. But then you'd see that work used on a box cover or, some sort of promotional poster. And you realize that these people were really smart. They were making a career out of it. They were in every set, Me, like I said before, I was a bit of a dabbler. So I had my fingers in a lot of different pies. I was doing cover here, a trading card here, occasionally inside story. So I didn't have that focus to just do fantasy Magic the Gathering stuff. Again, I love fantasy, that kind of adventure fantasy, romantic fantasy. It's just that it'd be hard to turn down other work that was coming to you in order to, do this one other thing. So, but I would enjoy doing, so if anyone is listening who's, I'd enjoy doing some Magic cards again, When I could.
Well, I remember looking at your cards online, and I just got to say they're beautiful. Everything you do to me is beautiful work. And I also noticed about your work is you don't have one particular type of medium you work in. If you're painting, it could be watercolor, it could be oil.
Some people have a hard time telling. That's what I was told. I think it was Chris who told me that. Some people said, no one knows what you work in. No one can tell. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I think it pretty much looks like watercolor. He says, no, not really. You do these other things in there. And, Dave Dorman does the same thing. Dave Dorman works in acrylic, mixed media with acrylic and oil sometimes. And when he does oil, it's pretty much all oil. But one of the first pieces of originals that I saw of him after seeing printed was this Predator cover that he did for Dark Horse. And it was amazing. It's the Predator. And he did two such amazing things. It was the Predator versus Aliens. One was a wraparound cover for Wizard or something, magazine or something. But the other one was a single cover. And I remember seeing, even when I saw the original, I'm looking at that and thinking, is that oil? Is that watercolor? Because it looked to me like a watercolor, except I looked and I couldn't make it look like that in watercolor. And I'm pretty good at watercolor, and I couldn't make it look like that in watercolor. Then I found out he worked in very thin oils. Wow. And so it's translucent sometimes, so the paper bounces through it. And I've tried to do it, and I haven't been able to do it. I tried working the way he works and have not been able to match it. I just mentioned this to him the other day. He was doing one of these live things on Facebook. He was in an old man's face with a beard. It was terrific. And I'm just marveling at the luminosity. and he paid me a compliment about my watercolor because that's the way Dave is. When he can't take a compliment without giving a compliment, but being too nice a guy. But I still marvel at what he did. I couldn't tell what it was in. And I think that's good. Generally speaking, I think Dave's got a certain aesthetic. So do I. There's areas where Dave and I meet, and where we depart as far as approaches, which is true with all the guys whose work I really admire. But for me, I don't even know that I have a style, but I have sort of an aesthetic, the way that I kind of, design things and the way I put down color. I think if I'm working acrylic, oil, or watercolor, usually it looks like I did it, but it's not because I draw a particular way. More likely that I compose a particular way and that I organize color a certain way, and maybe I apply paint a certain way. So,
and but how do you decide what material you want to work in? If it's going to be oils, or what is it? The project that dictates?
I can tell you, right? Yeah, initially it was watercolor because that was what I was best at. Here and there, I did some oil things as I felt I was getting better with oil, and an acrylic, which was the first thing I really learned how to paint with, but I didn't like it. As I got better with acrylic, occasionally I would do something in acrylic, and sometimes it looked like crap, and then I would not touch acrylics for a while. Right now, I feel much more comfortable with acrylics. Recently, and unfortunately, I can't show this image. Aftershock Comics contacted me, Joe Pruitt, who's a great guy, and I did some stuff with him with Caliber many years back in the 90s for their Negative Burn, I think it was. And he asked me if I was interested in doing dealer incentive cover for them. I said, sure. And then he said, and I said, let me know when. He goes, well, I got to figure out something that would work with your aesthetic. He actually used the word aesthetic. And I said, well, I'm open. I see you guys do a whole lot of different things. Let me know. Then about a week later, he said, I got a Rush job. Can you do the Rush job cover? And I said, okay. So I did it in acrylic. I think I would have liked to have done it in oil if I had enough time. I could have done it in watercolor, but when I was thinking about it, based on the design, I thought that watercolor was going to be tough to handle. With large areas, watercolor becomes more of a problem. Now, in the end, when I did the piece, I realized that it really wouldn't have been that much of a problem. But I enjoyed doing it in acrylic. I'm pretty pleased with the way it came out. There really isn't much else that I would do to the piece. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's going to see print either January or February. It's issue number 2. The first issue is coming out in December. It's called Knock 'Em Dead.
Okay.
And there's already promotion for it online. It's Knock, and then apostrophe EM Dead. Okay. And the notion is that this wannabe comedian, young man, dies but comes back. And now he hears dead comedians. And I like to say, they don't know they're not funny, but that's not the, they're not funny all the time. But no, actually, supposedly the jokes they give him, his career starts, rising because of it. Yeah. So it's like this dark comedy that, to be honest with you, it's a pretty clever idea. I can actually see this going somewhere as a property, Yeah. And I was kind of honored because the first cover, I don't know the name of the artist who did the first cover, but it's really good. The dealer incentive cover is done by Tony Harris, who's always terrific. And I didn't see what the regular cover is for issue number 2. But the first issue has 2 really good covers. So it's kind of nice to be on board, be part of that. So I do hope and expect to do at least one more cover for Joe Pruitt for Aftershock, but I don't know what title it would be for, But they're a nice company. They have a lot of different things, and it's kind of fun, And that was just a few weeks ago, by the way. So this is this is my most recent freelance job. Okay. So, but I can't tell you because it's not out there. When it's out there, I'll pop it up on Facebook.
And I'll look forward to seeing it. Yeah. Would you be interested in showing some of your work right now? We can talk about that and some of your characters. So when you load up, just hit the share button.
I'll do the regular stuff, or would you prefer me to do magic first?
It's up to you.
Well, the magic thing would be shorter, so why don't
let's do a little magic. We'll show some of those, and then we'll move on to your other stuff.
Magic one first because it's shorter.
Okay.
So let me pop you up here.
I'll wait till it pops on here.
I'm not doing 2 monitors. Stop telling me stuff.
No.
Don't show these tips again. Just now, the thing is, I've got to see what it shares because I'm not seeing options for what. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Oh no, this looks like Blackboard. This looks exactly like Blackboard.
Oh, wow. I haven't used Blackboard in a while, but I love
Blackboard has a thing called Collaborate that I use every week, for my classes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to add now to here, and there we are.
Okay, come on.
I can give it the full screen if you want.
Whatever you like to do. They won't affect me.
Let's take a look and see how if we,
Okay, so basically these are samples and things that I showed for my class. Here's a blow up of a preliminary sketch. I showed them a couple sketches. Oh, one little trick. I do the sketches very small, not the size they're going to print, because like I said, that's priority mail stamp, but about the size of a trading card. And then I would enlarge it, and then I would, scan it. I would enlarge it, and then I would fax it, and then later on I was scanning and emailing it larger. First of all, they could see it better, and also looks like I did a lot more work.
Yeah.
And this is what the final piece looked like. And it's a little fuzzy on the screen, but this is a watercolor. This is one of the first batch that I did for Urza's Destiny, I think it was just called. That's it, Urza's Destiny. Okay, so it's a Sarah Angel leading the pilgrims, basically. She's the angel of reason leading the pilgrims. I love the title of it, the whole idea of it. I wish I'd done it in oil, but I think it came out very pretty. They didn't hire me to do any more Sarah Angels, though, which was disappointed. I thought once I did one, I thought I'd get more. It never happened. Rats. Here's a preliminary sketch for Soul Feast, which was a fairly popular card at the time. Though not because of my art, because it was a good card for playing, which was explained to me by Magic card players. Is what the final painting looked like in watercolor.
That's great. I love how you get the candlelight on that.
Thanks. Let's see. Here's another one. This one is when I switched to oil, kind of by request. There was a new art director, and so I sent him a copy of my art book so he'd think of me. And he saw that there were other paintings in there in other mediums. And he asked me, would I mind that I had done 4 for them, and would I mind doing the next batch in oil? Of course, the right answer is yes, even though I did mind because I knew how much longer it would take me to do it for the same pay. But I also thought, well, it'll be good practice for me to do more oil. So that's why I did it. But it meant I spent like twice or longer doing the pieces. Not that the pieces necessarily look it, but that's just the way it is. So yep, this was what's it called? Something Wolverine, Deepwood Wolverine, or something.
I think that's what it said on the slide before it.
Yeah, so that's it. And there's a lot. You can see this cartooning going on in a lot of this. Obviously, there's no animal who actually gets in this pose.
Yeah.
Okay, here's some sketches done with the Westgate Hotel stationery. Westgate Hotel is where I stayed for San Diego for many years. And this was a color study done in acrylic, pasted on board. And then this is the working drawing. For oil, the steps were longer because since I'm going to work on gessoed illustration board, you can't draw well on illustration board, so with graphite or with anything. So you really need to transfer something that you've already figured out. Well, if in watercolor, the kind of paper I used, I could do up the whole drawing on there, make a copy of it just so in case I lost some of the imagery in painting, and just apply the paint in watercolor. But for oil, since I'd work on a surface with gesso, I had to do the extra work of all these like working drawings, which I don't really mind. But it's, it again meant more time. And here's what the final painting looked like.
Wow.
And when I was doing these kinds of pieces, I was now looking at what other artists were doing in Magic. I was looking at their color schemes. And so I was expanding my own color range by looking at what the other artists were doing. So that was also a really good thing about doing work for Magic. Here's Charmed Griffin. Yes, it's a griffin shooting feathers, which is supposed to be like metallic, gold metallic or something, at this kind of odd 6-leg blue saber tooth. There we go.
Oh, very nice.
You see, I was going for exaggeration. I mean, naturally, I leaned toward just being a realist, but when I started doing stuff for comics, I realized I had to cartoon more and go for more gesture. But it took a while to build that kind of confidence to do that.
Let me ask you, on this piece, though, how long would something like this take you once you start applying paint?
Too long. Each oil painting generally would take like 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
Well, also, you know, I was married, so it's not like I can just work around the clock like when I was single. When I was single in my early 20s, I would just never go anywhere. I'd just stay at my studio, work night and day, make a cup of coffee, take a nap, work. Once you're married, it's a whole different thing. So, you know, I have to take out time to have dinner, to have breakfast, to sleep, you know, with someone else. So, you know, except on occasion where a deadline was too crazy. So it would take like 4 days, but that doesn't mean 24 hours a day painting.
No, I get it.
I could probably paint it in like, you know, 2.5 days. But Dave Dorman can paint this in 2 days easily. Because he's got his technique down. He really does. With me, I'm always kind of questioning what I'm doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. That, you know, I'm not going to say bastard. That, you know, talented son of a gun. And that's the way it printed. You can't, you know, it's a blown up low res JPEG, but you know, so it's printing really small.
Yeah, no, that's
okay. Now here's a bunch of doodles with pen on paper. Psychic battle, Urza versus Baron.
Okay.
And there's the working drawing. This was on the back side of this is like graphite or charcoal, whatever, that then I rubbed down. So it's like part of the tracing. And there's a pen. This is a blown up pen sketch that I went from the doodle to the pen sketch and then to that working drawing. And then this is the final painting in oil.
Do you ever so when you transfer, you always just transfer by putting something down underneath and then kind of
no, what I actually do is I take the thing now sometimes I do an actual tracing onto either like copier paper, now you call it inkjet paper, or I would do it on a sheet of tracing paper, or I would take the drawing that I had done, scan it, print it out on paper, and then I would retrace it with very soft pencil on the back, and then I just flip it back over and I rub it down.
Okay. All right.
I like to do that more. Some people use like graphite sheets and stuff like that. I've never used those.
Because there's an artist, and I'm blanking on his name. I believe he does work for Magic now and D&D and stuff. And he does a lot of illustration board work, and he'll draw his pieces and then he'll just tape it down. He just uses a ballpoint pen to go over to.
Yeah. The only thing with that is that when you do that, it does put a groove in your drawing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put a groove inside my drawings.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes it'll even leave an impression on the board. Not so much if it's gessoed, but if it's not gessoed, like I wouldn't recommend any student do that for anything that's watercolor, because it'll leave an impression. It'll press a groove into the surface. You're going to put watercolor in, and you do not want to see what happens when the watercolor hits that groove.
Yeah.
It'll just grab the color, and you'll have marks that you can't get out. So, yeah. And the reason I say it is because I did it.
Yeah, I know. I've done it too in the past. That's
even have it with pencil drawings.
Yeah.
You transfer something down, you're rubbing pencil over a leg, and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Putting those lines around on her legs. Now she's got scars on her legs. I learned that while I was still in college. I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And it's back to the drawing board again. Yeah. Okay, so here's a famous card that I did called Captain Sasay. I wish I still had the originals because the original go for a lot of money. But it was really fun to paint her. So I wasn't the first one to paint her. A couple of other people had, or at least one other person had. So I had some stuff to look at. They asked me, I wanted to put like crew there, but they said, no, just her, and put the weather light. So this is the transfer drawing. This was a tracing over the working drawing with a micron pen. Then I flipped it. On the back of this, I sold this last year. But on the back of it, this has pinholes in it because I was showing this to my students in college. I had no idea it was worth anything. And collectors paid me really good money for this thing. Anyway, on the back,
I see the pinhole.
On the back was graphite from when I traced it and then I rubbed it down. And here's the final painting.
Wow.
They did use her on a wrapper.
Okay.
They used her on a wrapper, which is kind of cool.
On the previous slide, you had those little cross. Those were your registration marks?
Yeah, registration marks for putting it on illustration board corners. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I put it in the right place. As you know, having studied illustration, I was told about, doing things to the right proportions, following the guidelines that the art director, the editor gives you. So I'm always to this day, I'm thinking measurements when I'm designing a piece. And definitely when I start it, I want to make sure that I'm doing it right.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
But, I try not to.
No, I do the same thing. And when I was studying animation, and some of the animation they did that was traditional, I used a lot of registration marks to know where things lined up. I had to use it. I still use it to this day. It's one of the most useful tools I have.
Some of my students have a hard time imagining what it all means, but I learned those are those little lessons that you learn. You never forget them.
Yeah,
they're too important. Here's a sketch on laid paper for this. This is a watercolor sketch. I went a slightly different direction, and there's the finish here.
Wow.
This one could have been more polished, but deadlines. I couldn't take it as far as I wanted to because of deadlines. I was doing like 5 or 6 of them for that particular deadline. So this one's more rushed. I don't like it was rushed. I like the color. It just, I would like to have tweaked it and finished it more.
Let me ask you, a lot of people always say, they never know when a piece is finished. Now, for you, it's a deadline, but
deadline is dominant, so you have no choice. But no matter what piece you do, eventually you're just kind of abandoning it. At a certain point, you just got to say, okay, I either have to meet a deadline or I have to go on with my life. Something. Yeah. You have to stop eventually. But it is really hard. If you don't have a deadline, it's very hard if you don't have a deadline, to be honest with you. It's very hard to let it go.
That happens to me with sketches all the time, and then I feel I ruin it. I'm like, oh, I can push this more, push it more. I should have stopped.
Even the cover piece that I just did, it was pretty much finished as far as I was concerned. Then I scanned it in, I sent it to the client in one evening, and then I saw it up on the screen, and I thought, the arms should have deeper tones. Even though I like what I put down, it should have been darker, and so that's more rimlet. The arms are more rimlet. So I took my painting, went back in, carefully glazed some of the colors without destroying the colorfulness of it, deepened everything, re-scanned it, and sent it to them and go, by the way, I think this one's better. Ignore the previous email. This one, I think, go with this one. That happens. Like when you scan it, look at it, and now you're seeing it differently.
Now, let me ask you wouldn't have done that, and I don't know if you have the background in this, but you wouldn't have used something like Photoshop just to select and punch up?
Oh, no, I did a test to see if I liked it. Yeah, before I went in there, I did a test in Photoshop, and I was like, yeah, it does look better. And then I went and did it on the original.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, I use Photoshop for all kinds of things now, but I don't do color sketches or anything like that in Photoshop. I just I'll do ideas and changes. I'll definitely gather reference using Photoshop, all kinds of things. Photoshop is just not for finishing.
I understand. I do a lot of my finished stuff in Photoshop only because I'm colorblind, and I'd prefer to do traditional colors. I have my watercolors next to me here, my markers, everything, colored pencils, which is my all-time favorite. But the way I see colors, I know I could type in a color code into Photoshop and get the color I want without it looking off. So that's why I lean more towards digital coloring these days. But,
I did digital stuff when I was working while I was doing freelance. At one point I started working for television, creating news graphics for NBC.
Okay.
And I also did some for freelance as a freelancer for ABC and for CBS and the McNeil Air News Hour on Channel 13. Quite a while. And so I created stuff using a computer. This is before the Mac was invented, before everyone had computers in their homes. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like I was growing as an artist, like as someone who worked traditionally. It wasn't making me better as a painter. So I kind of, I gave it up to do comics, actually. I gave it up when I got the first job working for Kurt Busiek on Open Space. And I had to basically, it was weird. I had to basically tell this boss who treated me really, really well, was paying me great money, that I was leaving the job to work on a comic book. I felt 8 years old. But it was very friendly. They still had me come in and do a little freelance work. It was very good parting of the ways, which is excellent. They really were. They were great to work for. I really felt bad leaving there. I didn't feel bad leaving the other ones, but that one I felt bad leaving because they paid me. They treated me like gold, actually, like I was a star there. and to say, "Sorry, sir, but I want to go work on a comic book."
Yeah.
And I was like 30 years old or whatever I was, but that's what I wanted to do. So boom, I left. Here's one of the ones I liked the way it turned out. There's the color study.
Oh, wow.
And there's the working drawing. There's the transfer drawing. On the back of this it's retraced. This is traced off of that drawing you just saw. And then on the back, this is graphite, and I rub it down, then I painted this.
Wow.
And I see, you see, the thing about doing the magic cards, and I sometimes forget about this, and it's nice chatting about it, is for the Apocalypse set, as you can see in the notations on the side, is that because I saw what other artists were doing, it helped me to expand my palette of colors. So I'm doing things that I wasn't doing in the trading cards with the superhero characters. So that was a nice thing about this.
I also love your background on there. I just got to say on there, you don't have to go back. I was just going to say, I love the background, how it's so much softer, how you got this nice, like.
Well, I know to reduce that really small. I mentioned before that some of these people do incredibly detailed backgrounds. And my thought was, my art is probably not going to wind up on a box or a poster. So I wanted to communicate clearly at a very tiny, size.
Yeah.
So, the paintings I do were mostly about 8.5 by 11 for a thing that's prints the size of a property mail stamp. So I wanted to keep the background simple. Now, this is one of my favorites here. It's Whirlpool Rider. It's a merfolk. I only got a chance to paint 2 merfolk. I don't think they look as much like other people's merfolks, but I really like the way they turned out. Anyway, so this one I still have. So I showed this to my students because I still have the original.
Yeah.
With the color study for it. And this is basically a micron pen tracing of the sketch you saw before, and then watercolor splashed on it. And then there's the finish.
Wow. Very nice.
That little color study is very helpful.
Yeah.
It guides me, And this is mostly cartoons. I didn't pose anything for it. This is because it worked. If it didn't work, then I would have somebody pose, because I do use models when I can. But for this, no model was just fun.
Yeah.
Wow, sometimes I can get away with a cartoon. Yeah. And this one's one of my favorites.
It is. It's very nice.
That's all. I have many, many more, but this is the.
It's nice. Let me.
Would you like to see superhero stuff?
I would always like to see superhero stuff. I'll tell you right now, I grew up loving superhero, but I was always a big sci-fi fantasy guy. And to this day, I think I'm more sci-fi fantasy than I am superheroes. But
I was 8 years old. I saw some comics when I was a little kid, but as of when I was 8, I think is when I started collecting 12-cent comics, and I was hooked for life for the most part. Yeah. So superheroes. Yeah. So
I know I love them. When I was a kid, you're a little older than me, but when I was a kid, I grew up on the cartoons of, the Super Friends, and Spiderman is Amazing
Super Friends for me. I was a little older, and so the Super Friends for me didn't cut it. Though I did like the Batman Aquaman hour. That was okay.
With the Filmation one, yeah.
Yeah. And I like the Marvel cartoons that were slapped together animatics, basically.
Yeah.
Done from the comics. Not true animation. I remember the Spider-Man with the theme song, Spider-Man does whatever. And the original Fantastic Four cartoon. We were glued to the screen watching that stuff. Myself, my older brother especially. We collected comics together, and we watched every one of these cartoons. For that was just there's nothing better that could be happening in the world than these Saturday morning cartoons with our favorite comic book characters in them.
That was my introduction to superheroes, was those cartoons. And so, I loved them my whole life. For comics, though, I was reading newspaper strips before I got into comic books, and I was always a newspaper strip fan. But I remember my
newspaper. That unfortunately, I know what they were, but we didn't get newspapers. We didn't have a family newspaper. So that's so later on. I knew of them, but I think my first. I'm not sure if I saw the Charlie Brown cartoons first or if I saw the strip first. But I love comic strips. But rarely saw them because no newspaper was sent to the house. I wish.
Speaking of the Charlie Brown cartoons, the Peanuts cartoons, I just saw today. I don't remember if it was on Facebook or somewhere on social media
that they're not airing.
Not airing. That's very sad.
I was looking forward to it. I recorded it. I do have it on DVD, but but yeah, no, it's a shame. I don't know the reason behind that. I didn't click on the link. I don't want to read conspiracy theories about, why. Like, we don't believe in Halloween anymore, whatever it is.
I kind of skimmed it. It was basically that I think Apple has the rights to it, so they're putting it on Apple TV.
I clicked on something that someone shared, and in there I read some comment about Schultz's widow, that she's holding on to it and won't let it air or something like that. And it just, and they said they used her first name as if they know her. Yeah. And I don't know if they know her or not, but I met her and she's a sweetheart. And I don't want to be reading crap about Schultz. So I just, because I told you I went to the Reuben Awards when I was married to a comic strip editor, and I got to know people, got to know Charles Schultz a bit and his wife. And, so I just don't want to hear people talking about all kinds of crap, but it's a darn shame. I mean, it's like the best Halloween cartoon ever made.
I know.
I
agree with you.
It's great. It's a great cartoon. They just knocked it out of the park.
I mean, anything that I basically collect anything Peanuts. I mean, I don't know if you can see, but right behind me, stuff's blocking it. I got hard-covered Peanuts up there, the Dell Peanuts, some Peanuts up there. I
hate to tell you, my ex-wife was his editor.
Oh, I got the little ornament for 70 years.
Yeah. No, that's cool. It was Charles Schultz's editor. When she worked as an assistant editor to the editor, longtime editor, Sarah, can't remember her last, Sarah Ashfield. Anyway, and when she retired, Amy became basically the editor. And so she got to know him, and because of that, I got to know them. She has a couple of originals. I don't have anything. Originals, but it was don't me wrong, it's a real treat. They're really nice people, very down to earth.
That's what I've heard.
My God, Charles Schultz, my God, genius, just amazing. I think Patrick McDonnell, who does Nuts, he gave there was a Reuben Awards thing after, I guess Schultz had passed away, and he basically declared, he says, Charles Schultz was the best cartoonist that ever lived. And I'm not going to argue with him.
I wouldn't either. I've met Patrick, and really nice guy.
He's a real nice guy. Him and his wife are both really beautiful people.
Yeah. And, but yeah, no. So that was, I was just, since you brought him up, I figured I'd.
Believe me, that, and there's nothing more surreal. I've been at the dinner just a couple times with them and other people like Patrick McDonnell and other wonderful cartoonists, and twice surreal. I was at Carnegie Hall, which I've only been inside Carnegie Hall, once, and this was it. And I was sitting behind Charles Schultz, and my wife was sitting behind Jeannie, because some composer had come up with some sort of musical tribute to Linus and Lucy and whatever. So there we are with them. Another time we're in Asheville, North Carolina, going to the Reuben Awards, and Amy was driving, and behind Amy, guess who we were driving? Was Jeannie Schultz opposite her and Charles Schultz behind me in the car. And I'm like, this is just surreal, having, grown up loving the comic strips and everything else. Too weird, So what a treat, that's the kind of stuff you can't even put a price on. It's just so amazing to have rubbed shoulders and gotten to know. And I have an art book that came out in '97 called Heroes and Angels, Ray Lago, Heroes and Angels. And my wife made it a point to bring a bunch of volumes to give to the various cartoonists at the Reuben Awards. And Schultz got his copy, and he looked through it and he says, "Ray, you would have loved to have done pulp covers if you were around back then, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I just love the fact, and often he would know what I was working on, like Amy would tell him. And one time, I don't know if you know what Bill Maldon was. Bill Maldon was a very famous cartoonist who did World War II cartoons.
Did the which?
Bill Maldon.
No. What do you know the names of the cartoons? Sometimes I forget.
He has several books. One's called Up Front, Back Home, but they were like Joe, something and Joe. There were two soldiers who look like hell. They all look like they're filled with mud and everything. I don't know that they actually had a strip title or no, but there was a Jeep. There was a whole bunch of things, but he won a Pulitzer, as a cartoonist. So he's a very famous cartoonist, Bill Molden. I got to meet him. He wasn't able to sign my book for me, unfortunately, but I gave him a copy of my book to sign. He had injured his hand, so he wasn't able, and that was a treat getting to meet him. But he wasn't able to sign it. His second wife was going to try and get him to sign it. Just didn't happen. And I don't know if he passed away or whatever, but Schultz sent me one of his spare copies of the same book to me.
Oh, wow.
You know, so that's what I'm saying. You know, in other words, I don't know. Like I said, just like there's plenty of people in comics, I sort of feel the same way in comic books, where I've gotten to know these people and they couldn't be nicer, they couldn't be more welcome, be more supportive. I mean, just, you know, amazing. And I'm not just talking people my age, you know, more my age, like Dave Dorman and Scott Hampton and Chris Muller and, you know, all these guys who are terrific. But some of these older artists, like 10 to 20 years older than me, who are just, they couldn't be better people, you know.
Yeah.
So I know people have horror stories, but the people that I've really interacted with have been gold. They've just been terrific.
I have to say, I've been doing comics in some form since 1997 is when I first self-published, and then it's gotten me some other stuff and whatnot. Very few horror stories on my end, but that's one of the, but like you were just saying, it's one of the reasons I loved. I think this business has some of like the nicest people that, you know, and that I can call a bunch of them friends, whether they're well known or not. And you know, I have a good friend. I you know, he's really good about critiquing. I will show him my work, and he'll politely rip me apart, but he'll rip me apart. And
I don't dare ask for criticism. Yeah. It'll kill me. So
I have to once in a while, because I don't want to say I do a lot of second guessing, but certain pieces I'm like, would it be better if I did this or this? So I'll say, here's the piece. This is my thoughts on what I think. Tell me what you think. Or sometimes I won't even tell them, just, what do you think of this? Give me a critique. They'll critique it. And if they say the same thing I was thinking of changing, then I know I was probably in the right.
There's one or two people that I might email something to saying, you know, I'm thinking maybe taking this direction. But in general, I don't, because I'm a pretty harsh judge of my own work to begin with. And again, these things come with deadlines.
I know.
You know, the one time I remember I was in Florida and I had a show, and Neil was there. I gave him a copy of my book. He wasn't very friendly that particular day, but he wasn't rude either. He just like took it, looked at it, smiled, and moved on. Yeah. I don't know where he was going. He wasn't in a hurry, but anyway, he moved on. But I saw Alex Ross there. He was walking by. He said hello. And he was, of course, already a big deal. And later on, I saw him with a pile of books. And in the pile he had in his arm, it was like 5 books, whatever. On top of it was a trade paperback that I did a cover for that I was embarrassed by. It wasn't as good as it could have been. And all I could think was like, oh, no, Alex has that book with the cover that I'm not really pleased with at all on it. It hurt. Wow. It hurt. Just hurt. Right. So I'm saying is I'm very harsh judge of my own work. So it's just too painful. You have to let them go and move on.
Oh yeah. I've come to realize that too. I mean, but there's very few people I trust. You know.
Well, don't get me wrong. My students, I'm having them redo things all the time. Change this, do that. Yeah, that's my job. I try not to give anyone else that job over me.
Yeah. When I teach college, my students don't usually like me because of my critiques. I've been called the Simon Cowell of the art department.
Well, I don't know. Some students think my critiques are harsh. Mm-hmm. A lot of them I think appreciate it. Some of them don't understand that when you're in college, you get critiques. So when their work is being critiqued in front of everyone, their feelings are hurt. But that's what we're doing at the college. And not just, I mean, on a very regular basis, over and over and over again. It's not there is one-on-one time, but it's not a one-on-one course. I can't meet with 25 students every session, and it has to be done this way. So I don't know. You can never tell. So far, none of them are, criticize me too badly, and the student evaluations. Because they do get their revenge sometimes. Yeah. But I think they know that I'm doing it all to help them. I'd like to think that I convey that, because I really try to convey that.
Yeah. I feel I'm the same way. I mean, like you said, students sometimes take the revenge on the evaluations, but also doing art for so long, I got like that eagle eye. and I've been an art director. I've looked at work, and like if something's done in Adobe Illustrator, it's all vector. So if a point's off, it could have a little extra bump or a line coming out, and I could just catch those things. And that's what the students don't like, is when I see those.
I call it backseat driving, basically. Everything you're doing wrong, because it's because there's no skin off your nose. You're just looking. You're like, oh yeah, we change this. The perspective's off here. Yeah, the composition's not as good if you move this up here, move this over there. The tones, not the best choice. It's very easy to be backseat driver if you have some experience.
Yeah. I want to say we've gone over an hour, which I'm happy to continue.
Well, do you want to look at some of the superheroes?
I'm very happy to look at some of the superhero stuff, because, like I said, I love superheroes.
Okay, so let's do some of that.
Yeah.
There's not many step-by-step things. It's mostly just the images themselves.
Okay.
So you're seeing Thanos, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is from a trading card. So, ta-da, Thanos. One of the, I think it was from the first, the Marvel Masterpiece 2 set, the one that followed Joe Jusko's, acclaimed, victorious, amazing set that really spawned a resurgence in trading cards. And God bless Joe Jusko, because it really led to a ton of great assignments for the rest of us. Thank you, Joe. This is a cover, science fiction. Joe Clifford Faust, science fiction writer, Charles DeLint. Ken Myers in this, Ken Meyer Jr., who's on Facebook. He's a terrific artist. He and I are both in the same book together. I did the cover, and I think it was a 15 or 20-page story in here. I think this is is this the third one? This is number 4. This is the third story that I did for them.
Now,
after this, there was going to be an open space graphic novel, but when Carol, now I remembered her name, Carol Kalish. Carol Kalish was very instrumental in creating and implementing the direct market for Marvel and for comics. I mean, so she was a huge person in comics, from the administration end of comics over at Marvel. Smart lady, fun, terrific person. She's the one who opened the door for me into comics. It's thanks to her that I started working in comics, really. So anyway, so the idea was science fiction authors writing science fiction stories.
Yeah.
And it was called Open Space. And there was supposed to be a graphic novel that I did layouts for and a cover for, but when Carol passed away, they canceled the thing. Kurt made sure I got paid for my layouts and for the cover. But it didn't go anywhere after that, which is a darn shame. I would have really enjoyed, and I would have, of course, I liked Carol a great deal. It would have been great to continue to work with her. So this was done in oil, by the way. No reason. I just wanted to do it in oil. Here's Hellraiser, the cover for Hellraiser. The story was written by Lorraine Haynes. At the time, she was married to Dave Dorman, whose work I, admired a great deal. It's a great issue. It's got Ricardo Villagran in there, Paul Johnson, all painted work, really, really terrific. And this is the cover. Plus, I did, a story inside. I don't remember the number of pages, 15 to 20, pages inside. This Mark McClurnan was the editor. I really enjoyed working on this.
Wow.
You can see where some people wouldn't know that it was watercolor. Like the background looks like watercolor, but the foreground's got a lot of texture. So a lot of people wouldn't realize it was watercolor.
Now, when you do watercolor, it's just complete watercolor. You don't enhance it with like colored pencil or anything?
No, but there's gouache. White gouache is my white. Chinese white isn't opaque enough, so I use white gouache. So it helps me to create semi-opaque colors where I need it. And for example, here, the steering wheel had some gesso brushed on it. So it gave me some play that I could kind of dry brush paint around and create sort of a wood surface. So I did stuff like that. But it's all watercolor.
Cool. I got a comment. I just want to say we got a comment from Joe Ryan. Says, hey, I just wanted to say I enjoyed the stream from seeing your process and hearing your stories from the industry. Very inspiring for an up-and-coming artist. And Joe's one of our regular viewers on here, a graduate of the Kubert School.
Oh, thank you. I actually wanted to go to the Kubert School when I was getting out of high school because it was new. Unfortunately, it was new. So it wasn't properly accredited yet, so they couldn't accept my state scholarship, didn't qualify for basic educational opportunity grants.
Yeah.
So I actually talked to Joe Kubert on the phone once about it. I was hoping to go there because they were going to accept me. My samples weren't that great, but they were accepting a lot of people who just had some, German talent back then. And unfortunately, he said, check back with us in a year or two, and maybe we'll be accredited. But at that point, of course, I was at the college. So, but I would have loved to have gone to the Cupid School. I would have learned so much. It would have been a great training ground. Joe Kubert, my God. So anyway, this is a page from that story. I did use models. I think it looks real for a reason. Family and friends or whatever, playing the parts. And here's a double page splash from this Hellraiser story done for Marvel Comics for their Epic line. So it's a horror story based on Clive Barker's world.
And this is and you only work in paint, so this is
watercolor.
Watercolor. I mean, I figured watercolor, but I'm just saying. I mean, this is gorgeous.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Alex Ross liked this actually. This impressed Alex a little bit. So that's amazing in of itself, right? Yeah. So
that's a great compliment.
Yeah. Oh no, well, it was a great compliment. That's how I got to know Alex, because he was starting to put together Marvels for them. So he called me up and we chatted on the phone when he was working on Marvels. I actually chatted with him when he was working, which is, again, he's younger than I am, but my God, I mean, so advanced, like just so amazing. And he's become even more so. And he's a terrific guy. I know a lot of people don't get to know him. He's a real nice guy. He's generous. He's just a really good person, in addition to being a super talent. And this is a pinup done for the issue that came out before my Hellraiser story. It's watercolor over gesso textured surface.
Okay.
I like to experiment and play. I did a couple of these. Now, I did not paint this. This is Frank Frazetta. But I did this story inside the Vampirella 25th anniversary. So I got to do a story inside a book that has a Frazetta cover, which was a treat.
Yes.
So this is the comic book story. It was adapted by James Robinson from a story from the Vampirella Warren, comics, but it was done for Harris Comics at the time. And so here's some interior work from that.
That's gorgeous. What year would you say this was that you did this?
I don't remember. 90s, mid-90s.
Because I'm not going to lie, this looks very familiar to me, like I had this issue.
Well, it was before the art book. My art book came out in 97 or 98. So either 97 or 98. So this had to be done like 96, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And there's another couple pages.
Wow. And all this, and you use models on all these here, right?
There's cartooning involved, though. There's a lot of exaggeration.
I get that, but I mean,
I absolutely use models. I got friends, all kinds of people. I paid the guy who played Dracula posed for me for a whole bunch of things. So he came by, he posed for this, he posed for some trading cards at the same time. The model I used for Vampirella is a short blonde who had an apartment across the way because my wife wouldn't pose for me for it. So I said, okay. Well, I asked this girl Margaret, and she said sure. And she posed me for a few things, but you wouldn't look at her and think Vampirella, but she's really cute. And so she posed for, I did not have this outfit. She just wore a bathing suit. I didn't have anything like this. I never dressed in. Same thing as Dracula. There's no outfit. I didn't have any of that. But for example, look at Erg. You see that? The guy Erg?
Oh, yeah.
That's Don Wimmer.
Really?
That's Don Wimmer.
I can see that.
He had a little more hair back then. Okay.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, that's Don Wimmer. Now and then I'd get my old college buddies to pose for certain things, little cameos in my projects.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so there's Don Wimmer, about to die from a neck wound. That's what you do with friends.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's another double page spread. And now, probably one of my favorite double page spreads from the thing. I think I like all the warm colors.
Yeah. Very nice. Let me ask you, didn't do many interiors. You're mostly known for doing covers and stuff.
Covers and trading cards. But my favorite thing, ironically, is storytelling in comics. Unfortunately, as you know, it's hard to make money that way because it takes so much time. Anything that I can do on a monthly basis, I'd be too embarrassed to sign with my name. So I can't do monthly comics, sure, I could pencil a page, enough pages for a comic in a month, but I'd be embarrassed to put my name to it. They wouldn't be very good in order to make that deadline. I'm much more interested in doing these kinds of things and anthology stuff. But I have to say, I had a shot at doing an anthology thing for an independent publisher, a cute kind of, sexy thing. And I had troubles with the paper I was using, and I wound up not being able to do it. And there's no good excuse. So, as you get older, it's harder. I still love comics. I still want to do comics. But just a year or two ago, I had a chance to do something, and eventually I wasn't able to do it. So it's not like it was when I was in my 20s and early 30s. It's harder as you get older to, you really have to clear everything out of your life in order to do comics. Everyone has to leave you alone. You can't have interruptions, and you got to get your own mind set on what you're doing. Because and my problem is, I teach part-time. So that alone makes it very hard to do storytelling.
Oh, I don't disagree. I spend a lot of my time teaching, and that's my primary work right now.
Doing a trade card cover or pinup, that's possible. The story, I'm not saying storytelling can't be done, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It really is. And anything that happens, whether it's family related or work related, can completely torpedo the concentration. Then you lose time and you can't catch up on it and whatever. Anyway, I've bemoaned that I haven't done more. Here's like the last, no, it's almost the last 2 pages of the story.
This is great. I could just sit and I love the castle picture.
Thank you. Yeah, you can say I have to simplify, and mist and fog help.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, but it also was fun because I like things being painterly. Sometimes you get tight, sometimes you get more loose. Again, I really enjoy doing this, but I was under serious deadline getting these things done. So I had to try and take advantage of the medium, the watercolor medium, to contribute to the process, to speed things up, and also to make it look like the work I want it to be, more painterly. There's often that I overwork things myself, so I tried not to overwork anything in this project, and that's the splash page. Now, curious thing, I designed this page differently as far as the middle 3 panels, because what they put in the script, I told the editor wouldn't work. And he goes, oh, no, read it. So I redesigned. He goes, yeah, do it that way. Then when I did it, he goes, you're right. You should have let you do it the way you were going to do it originally. So I'm not happy with the center part of it. I like the bottom part, the top panel, because I had another design for it. But I had to change it because the guy told me to change it. And I was like, and then afterwards he was like, you're right. What you wanted to do was better. So I think, let's see if there's any more. Okay, pinups. This is for Portraits of the Marvel Universe, number 1, I think, or number 2, I forget. And it's that famous Ditko scene from Spider-Man number 3 where he lifts all that, weight. So you can get the serum in that Ditko-esque, container there to the doctors to save his Aunt May's life. One of my favorite scenes in comics history ever, if not my favorite. And I was so pleased that no one had asked to do it yet. So Mark McLaurin was the editor. He was my editor on Hellraiser. And I said, yeah, I'm shocked no one asked for that. It's yours. I said, yes, thank you. So it was the first time I painted Spider-Man.
And is Spidey one of your favorites to do?
Oh, yeah,
I know
absolutely. Yeah. I like Batman a lot from DC, and I liked Spider-Man from Marvel the most. I liked other characters and even teams, but that was it. Yeah. Now, this is also for Portraits of Marvel Universe, one of the other issues, a 4-issue pinup series. And there's a dream. I collected Daredevil, and there's this dream sequence where basically it's his father watching, and he himself actually watching himself, 2 versions of himself battling in the ring, drawn by Gene Cole and probably inked by Klaus Janson. And so I just love the idea of doing this scene, and I hadn't painted Daredevil, so it gave me, and I love his burgundy and yellow suit. So this gave me an opportunity to paint that. I hate to say that's probably the main reason I wanted to do it, was to paint him in that outfit. That's the fanboy in me. There I am, a working professional, and the fanboy still comes out.
It comes out. Daredevil is actually one of the first comics I started to collect myself. I used to love it.
I haven't bought in, of course, years, but I really, enjoyed Daredevil. Yeah. Here's trading card, one of the first trading cards, along with that Thanos one, Adam Warlock for the Marvel Masterpiece 2 set. And the original is pretty small, but these were great exercises because you're painting superheroes without dealing with storytelling. You just could, just really do little miniature pinups. It was really, great. This was such a treat to do. This is also one. This is from the second set, the X-Men Ultra Fleer set, the first X-Men Ultra Fleer set. Okay. And I was thinking those Kirby pinups. You know what I mean? Those kind of happy Kirby and Ditko pinups from the Marvel, from comics and Marvels back in the late '60s and early '70s, especially late '60s when I was, first reading them. So I wanted to get that kind of, it would have been like, hey, to all my fans, the high flying angel, autograph kind of thing. They used to do that a lot in Fantastic Four, especially. And here's, of course, Dark Phoenix for that same set. And that was, again, I mean, does it look like fun? It was fun. This is great. I really enjoyed painting this. There is Hulk versus Wolverine, sorry, Thing versus Wolverine. And I don't particularly like this. This is where Wolverine cuts him up, which is like a very no thing to be doing to, you know, fellow hero. You know, Wolverine doesn't play fair. And, you know, the Thing was wearing a helmet or something for a while after this to hide his scars, which is, of course, ridiculous.
Yeah, that's when he removed part of his
Yeah.
Stone. I remember that.
He cut right through the rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's adamantium, you know. And here's Cable versus Strife. I wasn't that familiar with the characters because at that point I wasn't reading the X-Men anymore. But I looked at all the stuff and I came up with, you know, my version of it. And again, it's color schemes and all that. Even doing these, not having done the magic yet, you know, you're looking at what other people are doing and you learn from everybody.
I have to say, I love your Strife. You don't have to go back. I just want to say, when he came out and I was, you know, reading X-Men at the time, he was one of the characters I had the hardest time drawing. And just because of that helmet, and I'm like looking at how you handled his helmet, I'm like, that was beautiful.
My problem with designs a lot of these characters is I couldn't figure out how they could walk through the doors. Like, how could they get into a room unless they teleport? I wasn't sure. Now, this is a tri-card set. It was available through Walmart, but when I was hired to do it, it was as a backup because Steranko had been hired to do a 3-card set, and they weren't sure if he was going to come through. So this was the backup. But, you know, he did come through. They printed it, and they still printed mine as a Walmart specialty card. The cards actually go for good money. I don't have many of them, but I think I have like one set of the 3 and a couple of other, you know, parts. But they, you know, this became a very hard to find card. So again, a lot of fun. You know, a little bit of a rush job. Here's Gambit. They printed him on the cover of Wizard magazine.
Okay. Wow.
So, which is kind of a treat to see. You know, well, it's the only cover I've had for Wizard magazine. So they didn't pay me for it, but they sent me a box of them, which was nice. Unfortunately, I still think I have them. I never did anything with them. So there. I think I still have, like, you know, I think I gave away a few, but I think I still have like 8 or something, or 10, or I don't know, you know. So it's kind of weird. But again, color schemes. This is like analogous colors for the most part. It was, you know, playing and, you know, trying different things, which that's what these trading cards gave me a chance to do, is play with, you know, come up with a fun pose and then play with the color, experiment, you know. There's Rogue. This is one of my favorites also.
It's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I like the character. Her outfit is a Jim Lee outfit. They used, this was inspiration for a statue, a little resin statue that I never got a copy of, that Bowen Designs did. Randy Bowen himself didn't work on it. I think some of his assistants or other people in his company did. But he wasn't sure, but he thinks that they used it as inspiration. And fans brought it up to me because I never even saw the statue on Facebook a few years back. Fans brought up to me that they thought that it was based on, and I look at it and However, they call it the Jim Lee design because it is a Jim Lee design character, and they made the face look like the way, and the hair look like the way Jim Lee did her hair and face. Yeah. So facially, she looks like Jim Lee's work. Pose-wise and everything, it's mine, and it's not this random rocks. It's like a sort of not a brick wall, but like a wall with, you know, I want to call them cement, you know, or whatever it is, large bricks, not cinder blocks, but something like that she's breaking through. One of these days I got to buy one, but they're like $250, $300. So yeah, so I should have been sent one anyway. One of these days I'll knuckle down and buy one, you know, just because, and then I'll post about it on Facebook. Here's Doctor Strange for one of the Spider-Man sets, and they're always joined. Their stories of Spider-Man, Doctor Strange are joined by the Wand of Watum. So I was really pleased to do this. However, at the time, the art director at the trading card company, Flair, wanted me to have Doctor Strange in sort of a hipster doofus thing that he was wearing at the time. He had like dark sunglasses and a dark outfit. And when I talked to them and I said, please don't make me do this. I said, that outfit is going to be gone. And, like, you know, and I doubt they've had a team up with Spider-Man wearing that outfit. And I said, trust me, I know, you know, I know this world. I know these things. And they said, okay. And they let me do the traditional. Thank God.
Yeah.
But I got to paint the Wand of Watum, which is pretty cool for me. That's awesome. Same thing here. They wanted me, this Death of Gwen Stacy, they wanted me to do Gwen Stacy falling toward the viewer with Spider-Man up on the bridge shooting out his web at her and the Green Goblin circling around on top. And I said, fortunately, I saw that exact same design being done for the Portraits of the Marvel Universe pinup book by John Estes. So I said, oh, Marvel's already doing that in pinup book. So I said, okay, well, what do you think? And I said, I showed them this, and they liked it, and I did it. So this is one of my favorite trading cards also. Alex Ross paid me a great compliment for this. And by the way, he lent me the mask.
Oh, really?
The mask that he used for Marvels. Yeah. And he called me. He asked me, is that available? You know, did you sell it? Because he wanted to trade or something. And I was like, oh, I had sold it, unfortunately. Rats. Yeah, if I knew, I wouldn't have. I could have traded with Alex. Oh, man.
Amazing.
Anyway, but I really enjoyed painting this. I think it shows, you know. And what he liked was that dark cloud. That's the trail from the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Rider. And it's there for composition, but it's also content. When he realized that that's what it was, he really liked it because of that. So, and I'm grateful to him for lending me the mask, of course, and for being somewhat of inspiration for this piece, actually. His work was, and his story, because Marvel's had already come out at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, here's Spider-Man punching the Vulture. I try to give it a nice Ditko feeling to the thing. Because that's what I think of when I think of Spider-Man punching out the Vulture. I think of Ditko and Romita.
Yeah,
that's what I grew up with. So this was fun, you know, slightly cartoon, some reference, but you know, obviously, you know, people can't hold those poses exactly.
Yeah.
And for the background, I found some reference, again, not exactly everything together, but you know, pieced it together, stylized a little, and I liked the way it came out. One guy wrote me one time saying that he liked the fact that I caught it mid-action, and that afterwards the two of them were going to fall like dead pigeons. Right after this, gravity takes hold, you know? And yeah, he's absolutely right. You know, try to catch the apex in this thing.
You know, it's a little far for me to see. And you don't have to go back, but I was going to say I just love the webbing that you did. How it was.
Oh, the webbing was a pain in the ass. I shouldn't say that. The pain
I can imagine.
And the pain of the butt. Spider-Man, but it makes it. You have to do it. You have to do it well. Have to do it carefully, very carefully. The webbing I draw is mostly based on Romita, and that's also the way Alex followed it the same way, because there's other people do it other ways with too many webs. So I think we both kind of cotton to Romita's version of it. This was the same design was used for a trading card, but this was used as a double page spread pinup thing for Spider-Man magazine, which is like a kids magazine. And they profiled various characters, including X-Men characters. And it was like on the right side is printed information plus a little portrait piece. Here's another one, same thing for Spider-Man magazine of Gambit. And it gave me a great excuse to paint this terrific tree. I like the way Gambit turned out, but I really love the tree.
No, it's really nice too. I was going to comment on the tree.
The tree, of course, gets covered up with type and a headshot. That's what happens. More recent, a few years ago, Craven trading card for Spider-Man set. I enjoy doing this a lot. I did these a bit bigger because it's just because I wanted to work bigger. Here's Mysterio for the same set. Again, a lot more recent. Yeah. Just a purple and green composition for the most part.
Yeah.
And Moon Knight, which I never got a chance to paint before. Heavily art directed in this particular case. They wanted exactly what you're seeing here. The whatchamacallit, the crescents being tossed at the viewer. Below him, a more old antique style building. Above him, more modern building, and a moon in the cloudy sky, dark cloudy sky. I swear that was the description. So this was heavily art directed, but it was a good idea. You know, I like this.
I like it.
Thank you. And that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's amazing. I mean, your work is just gorgeous to look at. You know, like I said, I do wish I could have found the stuff that I own of yours just to even share it with you, just to show, see if you remember anything about it. I believe the Spider-Man one I have is of him swinging through the city. And I remember there's like the building is kind of got this yellowish gold reflection.
It's from the Spider-Man premium set, yes.
Yeah, that's the print I have. I mean, when I find I go through them every now and then for inspiration and things, and that's one I stop on and look at quite a bit.
That was probably the last Spider-Man I painted until the Spider-Man trading card #1 for the set a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Unfortunately, I have to kind of end. We're at it over a little over
a long time.
But I feel like I can sit and talk to you for a lot longer because there's so much.
We're all fans of the same stuff. That's
exactly.
No, and that's I think why I enjoy my art students. Is a lot of them are they're into more current stuff, but they are into comics. They're into gaming. I'm not so much into gaming, but the video games look terrific. They're into toys. They're into animation. So even though it's the newer stuff that I may not be into, they're into the same kind of creation of stuff. So I kind of relate to them still because in our heads, we're probably just a little past college age in our heads. But in reality, of course, we have mirrors. We know how far.
Exactly.
And as much as I enjoyed being in college, I would not want to go back that far in time and live through that again. But I relate to my students a lot because I love the same stuff that I loved when I was their age, and they love the same stuff, except it's the newer stuff. And now and then they discover stuff more from my time, and they'll start talking about it. And whether I did it or someone else did it, they're like, "Do you know about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I grew up on that. I didn't." And so that's the reason we can chat forever about this stuff because we like all this stuff, Well, we're all the same thing. Like you talked about Peanuts. I had no idea you were a big Peanuts fan. And the fact that I actually, sat behind him at Carnegie Hall and whatever.
That's amazing.
And I know. Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Who was it? Last week I had Don Chin on. And Don actually was at his studio and got to
cool.
At his studio, and like all these stories. Next week, I don't think the person knows knew Charles, but
look, I can't believe that I growing up with his. Did I think I'd ever look? Did I ever think that I'd know Michael Kaluta or Bernie Wrightson or anyone? No, of course not. I never thought I'd know any of these people. Nick Carty, I wound up through Spencer Beck, the dealer, nice guy. Did a little trade thing with Nick. I gave Nick my business card. He calls me up to chat about watercolors and stuff like that. Nick Carty, who I grew up collecting Teen Titans with and Brave and Bold, chatting with me on the phone. It's like this is surreal. This is surreal. So there's lots of people like that. I mean, guys like just so many terrific artists, older and around my generation, that there's no way in heck I would have ever thought I would meet or get to know or call friend or have their phone numbers to chit chat. I mean, at one point I was supposed to do a Rocketeer story for Dave Stevens. It didn't work out because Dark Horse had some problems. And it was Kaluta who was pitching me to Dave Stevens to do it. And I'm having a conversation with Dave Stevens on the phone, a long conversation. I'm like, I can't believe I'm chatting with Dave Stevens about the Rocketeer project on the phone. How's that not didn't happen? That's but that had nothing with me. It had to do with Dark Horse cutting their rates. So all these amazing things, you can't even put a price on it, or it's hard to even measure the impact because it's just wonderful. And I do occasionally hear musicians, singers, actors talk about similar things when they get to, hang out with and get to know people whose work inspired them to do what they do. I had a brief meeting with Frazetta. Like I said, I worked at Neil Adams' studio. All these little things like, oh my God, if you told 8-year-old me or 12-year-old me that was going to happen, well, first of all, it would have inspired me to get into it sooner, of course. But I wouldn't believe it. I would have said, no, you're lying to me. Who are you? If I went back in time, to get away from me, you old creep. You don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm you, really. And let me tell you what's going to happen. It's just terrific stuff. And I can't even, it's a good life, but it's a good life doing stuff you love.
Yeah,
really
exactly.
Things can happen with relationships. You can be I don't have any kids, but people are disappointed with their kids. Family members die, all the same as everything else. But there is something special about doing something you really enjoy doing, pursuing a dream of some kind, and going with it because it doesn't always go the directions you want to go or plan. Which is why I gave up on planning years ago and just figured, let's see where things go. No, it's it's like I said, you can't put a price on it, at all, and it really makes things worthwhile. You know, it really does. And when fans want my signature on a print, or want to buy a print, or want to buy original art, or want to commission me to something, it's, you know, it's still like a pinch me thing that people want to, you know, they want something of mine, autographed, they want to commission, all that stuff. It's easy to take that for granted. I can't do most of what people want me to do in that way. Commissions take me too long to do. I do them here and there. But you know, it's amazing. It's terrific. If anyone had told me that when I was a kid, I would have said, you know, you must be high. There's no way. No way. So can't complain.
Well, I want to say, number one, thank you for coming on. I've had a blast, and I have said this on multiple occasions, but talking to you has been a big inspiration. Not only have you been an inspiration in my, you know, for me to do work, even though I don't do the same stuff you do, it's just, I love what you do so much. I look at it for inspiration. But I always say it makes me want to kind of stop the interview just so I can go draw or pull out my watercolors or something. And I really feel this way. And even though I've said it before and I've meant it before, this is the first time I'm upset I have to go to work tomorrow, because I would love just to stay up all night and take my watercolors that I have right next to me right here, my Winsor Newton little quick set, and just start.
I know how you feel, because not that I don't paint, I paint and stuff, but for example, Joe Rubenstein is really known as a great comic book artist, but he's also a great painter. He's been popping up all these amazing watercolors, and oil paintings too, but watercolors, and it's like he just keeps doing them. And I'm like, man, do I feel like a slacker? He is like, just every day he's painting away, painting away. I don't know how he has the energy, the attention, because he's my age, but he's just doing these beautiful works. So whenever I see them on Facebook, whenever I see this art on Facebook or on Instagram, I feel just like you do. Where are my paints? Where's my stuff? You know, I think, oh, I got to prepare my lesson for tomorrow. Son of a, you know.
I know.
I'm with you.
I want to say Joe Ryan said great show tonight, and I have to agree with him. It really was.
Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
All right. So I'm gonna just send you backstage for a minute and do my wrap up. Okay. All right. Thanks again for coming on.
Bye, guys.
All right, guys. So thanks for tuning in. For everyone who tuned in, Joe, thanks for your comments tonight. I had a really fantastic time. I mean, it was a blast. I'm gonna have to bring Ray back sometime in the future and talk more about some stuff. But next week I got Kate Seeger coming on, who at the moment her book escapes me, but she's written the second part of her fantasy novel. It's the part 2, and we're gonna talk about fantasy books and her story. And you love fantasy, make sure to tune in. All right, so I will see you guys next week. Follow Ray on Instagram and Facebook, and have a great rest of your week, guys. Bye.